Top Secret Sci-Operative Training Mission. Reading Passage. Types of Elements. Mission. Understand that elements are classified into metals, nonmetals, and metalloids based on their properties. Tips. Remember to beam as you read through the passage below.
Hey, Aki! I've noticed our armor gets really hot when we use metals like aluminum or copper. I think I have a solution. Why don't we use something like germanium for our armor instead?
You're right, Nikole. It does tend to feel hot when we are in the field. Why do you think germanium would be a better fit?
Great question. Germanium is not a metal. Metals like aluminum and copper are excellent conductors, which are materials that allow heat and electricity to pass through them easily, while nonmetals typically do not. Nonmetals are often insulators. Insulators are materials that do not allow heat and electricity to easily pass through them. Maybe the armor won't feel as hot if we use something other than a metal.
If germanium isn't a metal, then what is it?
Germanium is actually a metalloid. Metalloids are sometimes called semimetals, and they are elements that have properties in common with both metals and nonmetals. I was thinking, since metalloids share some properties with metals, but also with nonmetals, why not use them for armor instead? That way we get the best of everything.
If they share properties with metals, then wouldn't metalloids feel hot in battle too?
Well, not necessarily, because metalloids are semiconductors. Semiconductors are materials that have properties somewhere between a conductor and insulator, and have characteristics of both. This means metalloids do conduct heat and electricity, just not as well as metals. Therefore, the armor wouldn't get as hot.
I still think we should use metals because they have the highest melting points of all the elements. An element's melting point is the temperature at which it turns from a solid to a liquid. The higher the melting point, the more damage your armor can withstand before it melts off your body and you are vulnerable.
You bring up a good point, Aki. Protection should be our top priority, but I am still concerned about the armor feeling hot in battle. I know how we can settle this debate. Let's ask Dr. Pauling which is best.
Nikole and Aki, I am happy to see you're discussing the different types of elements. You both have great points, but I can certainly help settle this debate. Learning about an element's properties will help you understand why we use certain elements in gear, like in your armor and laser. Let's start by taking a look at the periodic table of elements. The periodic table of elements is a representation of all the known elements, both naturally occurring and man-made. Elements on the periodic table can be categorized in a variety of different ways. One common way to divide the periodic table is by identifying elements as metals, nonmetals, and metalloids.
Examine which elements are metals, metalloids, and nonmetals in the periodic table of elements on this page.
It looks like most of the elements on the periodic table are metals, but there are also two other categories, metalloids and nonmetals. I already did a lot of research on metalloids, but can you tell me a bit more about nonmetals?
Nonmetals are elements with properties that are generally opposite of metals. Nonmetals can be solids, liquids, and many are gases at room temperature. Metals and metalloids are usually solids at room temperature. The elements are categorized into these groups based on their properties.
What do you mean by properties? Do you mean the way the elements look?
Well, appearance is just one characteristic we can discuss. For example, we can use the word luster to describe how light is reflected on the surface of an object. Luster is an object's shine or metallic appearance. Metals usually have luster, and metalloids often do as well. On the other hand, nonmetals tend to have a dull appearance or low luster.
I don't think comparing an element's luster will help us decide which material is best for armor.
You are correct, Nikole, but we can compare some of their other physical properties instead, such as malleability,
What do you mean by malleability?
We use the word malleable to describe an object's ability to change shape or compress under pressure without breaking. Metals are very malleable. Metals are also ductile, which is a word that is often confused with malleable. If a material is ductile, it can stretch and change its physical form without breaking. If a metal is ductile, then it can be drawn into thin wires.
If metals are malleable, this means we can hammer them into the shape of armor, right? The armor is much more comfortable when it fits perfectly.
Exactly, Aki. Malleability is one reason metals are great materials to use for armor. Non-metals and metalloids are usually more brittle than metals. Brittle means an object is delicate and can be easily broken or damaged. This means they cannot be molded and stretched like metals.
Yikes! We wouldn't want to make armor out of a material that is brittle. One hit from the hive and you would be vulnerable. If non-metals and metalloids are not good materials to use for armor, then what can they be used for?
Non-metals can be gases. Gas is a critical component of your laser. You have a chamber of trapped gas in your laser that helps create a narrow beam of powerful electromagnetic waves capable of melting the enemy's armor. Also, gases like nitrogen and oxygen are examples of non-metals that make up the air we breathe. The semiconductor properties of metalloids like silicon make them a perfect material to use for the computer chip in your AR spectrometer glasses. Your AR spectrometer glasses allow you to calibrate your laser hands-free. Metalloids are ideal for computer chip usage since they can conduct electricity while also acting as an insulator so they do not overheat. This makes it easier to control the electrical current in the computer chip.
Wow! It seems like there are a lot of differences between these types of elements. How can you keep track of all this information?
It's much easier to compare the types of elements when the information is organized. Here is a table we can use to compare the properties of metals, nonmetals, and metalloids.
Properties of elements. Metals. Metals make up the majority of the elements on the periodic table with properties such as conductivity, malleability, and ductility. Most are solid at room temperature, malleable, ductile, luster, good conductors, high melting point. Nonmetals. Nonmetals are elements with properties that are generally opposite of metals. Can be solid, liquid, or gas at room temperature. Usually a gas. Dull appearance, low luster. Brittle. Poor conductors. Melting point generally lower than metals. Metalloids. Metalloids are elements that have properties in common with both metals and nonmetals. Solid at room temperature. Generally brittle. Often have luster. Semiconductors. Properties of both metals and nonmetals. Varied melting points.
So, metals are the best material for armor after all. I understand that they are generally stronger, and metals have higher melting points that would protect us from the enemy's laser. I still wish there was a way to make the armor feel less hot.
You're in luck, Nikole. I have an invention that will address your concerns. My cool fan technology will increase the air flowing across the surface of the armor, which will quickly reduce the temperature of the armor.
Thanks, Dr. Pauling. With this technology, we can protect ourselves from the hive while staying cool.
Make connections. In each box below, write a connection between the text that you just read and either your prior knowledge or something in your life. Reading comprehension questions. Types of elements. 1. Elements can be split into 3 categories. 2. The periodic table below is shaded incorrectly. Find the mistakes and explain what needs to be corrected. 3. What is the difference between a conductor and an insulator? 4. What is the difference between malleability and ductility? 5. Are the following properties describing a metal, nonmetal, or metalloid? Poor conductivity, gas at room temperature, dull appearance. 6. Why wasn't germanium a good choice for the Sci-Operatives armor? Include at least 2 specific properties in your response. 7. Aki is picking an element for his armor. Which of the options below would not be a good choice? Explain your answer. Iron, symbol capital F lowercase e. Argon, symbol capital A lowercase r. Zinc, symbol capital Z lowercase n. 8. Aki found a sample in the lab of a material that is lustrous. He suspects that it is a metal, but this is also a property of metalloids. Propose a test that Aki could do on the sample and what the result would be if the sample is a metal and if it is a metalloid.